Alrighty, so in week 5, we make a change in what we're going to be covering because at this point you've had an introduction to Git, you've had introduction to HTML and CSS, and of course other topics like using frameworks like AIM to write prompts. And so what we're doing now is we're moving towards the part where we're going to start working on our project. I mean, we did have the kickoff, but at this point, we need to actually cover a very popular framework called Bootstrap. Now, if for those of you that are in the know, and actually if you refer back to week 1 where we had the complete developer roadmap, one of the things Mosh talked about was Tailwind. And I always, before I do updates to the course, I always go out and do some research. And so this year I had an opportunity to actually do a whole conversation with Gemini about this and whether I should use Bootstrap versus Tailwind. And the reason, after a bit of discussion, that we're going to stick with Bootstrap is because there is many templates that are freely available for students to use, which we will do once we finish our introduction to Bootstrap. Now, having said that, your Bootstrap, the way you're going to learn it, is very different than the way you were introduced through Free Code Camp with the HTML and CSS, but like we did on the practice code along. Okay. So for the attendance part of this, and what I'm going to have you do is do a little setup and allow us to answer any questions or get some experience with some of the cool things that actually we're going to see when you follow along with the code along from Web Dev Simplified. And a word about this, actually, I looked for more current content. In this case, it was 2022. And for my course, that's not generally, I like to find something more current, but Web Dev Simplified in the course of an hour and 15 minutes, which we will cover in 2 parts. So in this case, we'll have a part 1 for Monday and a part 2 for Tuesday. He really does a great job, and Gemini convinced me to stay with this one versus some other ones that we looked at just because of the quality of it. But one thing he's going to cover, which is a little bit older Bootstrap. Now, I happen to be already on the YouTube page, and I can tell that by seeing the 5.2 version right here. And I'm going to show you how to set this all up in a minute, but I'm just giving you the reasoning behind why I'm doing it this way. Okay. So the other thing, and that's where I was heading, is instead of using something like the interface from Free Code Camp, we're actually, now that you have a dev environment, you're going to be able to use that environment to actually code in. And so in this case, you'll actually, when you do the part 1 and part 2, is have a code along that I'll cover for that particular one. But we'll get some experience here in attendance. Okay. So in this case, we're going to complete the environmental setup and we'll engage with your peers about transitioning to the CSS framework, which is known as Bootstrap. Now you will see me often abbreviated as BS, and I laugh every time I do it, but it's kind of funny. So in this case, here's my challenge to you. I've provided you a link to the steps that you need to take. Okay, so let's actually go look at them. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to challenge you to actually try to do this. Okay, so what I'm going to do, because there's going to be a step 1 and you'll have a commit, there'll be a step 2, right? A step 3, then you'll have a commit, and a step 4. So what I'm going to do is challenge you to actually try to do this, okay, on your own. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, now pause and try it. And then when you come back, I'll show you what the results of what this will look like if you had it. Now, what I will show you is ultimately what it looks like in the end, but I will just talk about the steps to take, because this is one of the ways you learn, which is instead of having that step, and that step by step, by the way, is actually coming from the very first, and I should have said this earlier, his first 3 sections right here, actually. And if you look at YouTube, you've probably noticed this, that they have sections and you can actually roll down in the video to see what those are. So the setup and the container and breakpoints, and actually starting into the columns. Now we're going to break around, yeah, actually right there at 537. So in this case, you could actually watch him, but in this, because we're going to be covering a little different, and he does some assumptions based on the setup that I'm not going to do, and I will actually show you how to do. So when we actually start coding along, we can skip over this part, or you could rewatch it just to see, it never hurts to get a little duplicate. 5 minutes is worth your time to do it. Okay, so let's come back here. Okay, so here's what you're going to do, right? Attempt these first steps, right? So this is in your private repo, do these steps, and then do your commit. And then I will come back and show you what it will look like having done this part. Okay. Okay, so here's what it's going to look like just from a what do you need to have in your VS Code. Okay, so I'm going to move over to my VS Code, and I already have my private repo open. And in this case, I've already started my live server. Inside of the code along that we use for practice, now I created a new folder. That folder here, right? So that is the key, is where you're selected and where you create the folder. Then I called it, you need to call it Bootstrap. Remember, all lowercase. The only uppercase file is the README file. So then you create, so then inside of here, you create a file. That file name should be index. You create a file README, and you create a file style.css. Okay. And then on the README file, you actually needed to copy and paste this into the README file. So if I open that up, that's what you have. Okay. So that's what you have there. And then you'll have a commit. Okay, so remember, and just to say, if I haven't said this lately, you can do the git add or git status, git add, git commit. You don't have to do the git push until the end. Okay, so now I want you to try the next steps. Okay, where you install an extension, right? You're going to actually copy. Let's see, hit install, verify. Okay, so actually, now that I'm glad I'm looked at this, because I may change this up. By the time you see this, it may look a little different. But so you're going to try step 2 and step 3. Okay. Okay, so I went through and looked at this, and actually we can do this because okay, so let's just first talk about the extension. So in this case, you're going to load an extension. Remember that we loaded live server. So now you're going to search for IntelliSense CSS classes names in HTML. Okay, so if you want to know what that looks like, you go here. Now, when you look at your extensions, you're going to see what you already have installed. Okay, so I can see I have it. So because you haven't, you would hit install. And then when you find it, and you can just copy and paste here to search the marketplace. And when you go in there and you will enable. So you can tell I've already enabled because it says disable it, which means I have it enabled. Now the thing, and I'm just for a minute, I'm going to get rid of this. The way you know you had it is you type equals, and then it brings up a list. And this is what you want to have for when you're coding along, and you'll see this in just a minute. Okay. Okay. So let's go back here. Right. So we validate. Good. Right. Okay. Good. Okay. So actually, we're going to use container in a minute. So we don't have a commit yet. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go to the Bootstrap 5.3 quick start, right? So I'm going to go ahead and go over there. And now in the instruction, it says step 2, okay? So in step 2, there's a couple things. You can just copy this, okay? Now there's a thing I want you to notice, because I'm going to have you change something on the way they have their starting code, right? So if you just copy that and come, and I'm going to go back here, I'm going to actually do undo, undo, undo. Okay. So in this case, if you were to just copy the way they had it, you would have, so just to show you, you would have your title, you would have your link. Now, we didn't talk about the rest of these tags. These are the boilerplate tags that you learned already about, but in this case you would have a link, and this is where you're actually linking to the 5.38 minified, which means this taking out the spaces, and so you're actually linking to a web-based resource, and you don't have it local. Now the key of what they do is they actually put this script tag, which is for JavaScript, okay, down at the end of the body, which sometimes we still see, but is not best practice. So what you're going to do is once you copy that in, right, you're going to paste that right underneath the link in here. And then you're going to put a space after that and type defer. And defer is something, if you take my JavaScript class, which I hope you do, you actually learn about, okay? Which basically says, hey, don't load this until the DOM is loaded, and DOM is just the rendered page, okay? So let's go back to here, okay? So now we add, okay, so that's what that instruction was telling you to do. So now we're gonna add your custom CSS. And this is where, I think I already uploaded a new version of this, because one of the things the instruction didn't have was Web Dev Simplified. So first let's do the link to the custom CSS, okay? So it's a kind of a nice, and I'm gonna actually get rid of it to show you if you didn't actually get this done. If I just hit, there's a couple ways I could just do Control X, but if you do link, comma, CSS tab, it'll actually create, that's an Emmet shortcut way of doing things, right? Which is awesome. And because we've already created the file here, it sets you up to go. Okay. Now what we're going to get is from Web Dev Simplified's video. Okay. So I'm actually going to, I think I have it here. If you scroll down in his video, you will see a link to the breakpoint CSS. So if when you come over here, you actually come to a gist, and gist is basically a little snippet. And I think Control A, no, you actually can't get gist. I bet there is a way to get it, but you can just select all this text right here, copy that, okay? And then what you would do is open up your CSS file and paste it in, okay? So now that you have that, let's see. Yep, now you have a commit. Okay, so now do your next commit here. And now try the last step. Okay, all right, so try the last step and then I'll come back and show you. Okay, so for the last step, you're actually learning another Emmet command, which is Lauren, and in this case 20, or just in this case creates 20 words. And so this is kind of a nice thing, especially as you're coding along with Web Dev Simplified. So let's come over here and show you if you didn't get this. Like, so I already have mine, but if I came to an empty line and I type Lorem here, right, then it actually, and it just quickly creates that output, okay? So again, like using the exclamation point to exclamation mark to create the HTML, this is just another way to quickly create some Latin content so we can use it in our output, okay? So we don't have to copy and paste text from somewhere. So in this case, I haven't actually talked about what Web Dev's going to talk about in the beginning, which is why, what Bootstrap is, this idea of a container. And when he actually shows, and that's why I had you do the extension, you'll find it MD, and then looking at it. And this is where I probably should have been saying all the time, and this is what is getting, it would be good to get the pattern of, was whenever you do something, you move over to your browser and then you look at the output. Let me come back here. Okay, so what you can see is if you got all the way to this point, and this is where basically he's just in the style sheet going to give you this, which by the way is fine as you just start, but there are other ways in DevTools to actually see a similar thing around these breakpoints. And you might wonder, why isn't the hello world also aligned? And that's because it doesn't have any CSS classes in it. And we grab that content from over here. Okay. And you'll notice in his video, which again, I'm going to go back and recommend, even though we've done everything in these first 5 minutes, is to check it out because it gets you used to his style and how he does things, and it goes over some of the things probably I missed in talking about this first part, because really I focus more on just the logistics of getting everything set up. Okay, because having this set up, because it is a little different, again, we're using a newer version than he did, and just to show you kind of how to connect everything together. And again, as you code along, it is way important that you look at the output so that you make sure you're actually seeing the output he's seeing when he's showing. And then notice how he has this split, because you could actually set your screen up this way as well. Okay, so let's go look. I think you had one more commit here. There you go. And so now let's go back to attendance, because I might change this, but let's just scroll down, right? So in this post, right, confirm you had hello world, font successful, right? He talks about that. Actually, I didn't even talk about that. So that's a good thing to understand. Like if we wanted to disable Bootstrap, I could actually just disable this by commenting this line out. And when you do that, oh, I actually close it, 127, and I go to my demo, I go to my colon, my Bootstrap. Notice how that text is gone. So I'm going to do control, and in this case, forward slash is a nice way to comment out things. Okay, and I got that because I went back here and I go, oh, that's right. So we did look at which was, and now the other thing is, which tool are you most excited to use? And I said Lorem Ipsum, but also we could use the link.css as well. Okay, and so this class for, any of this stuff. And what is one thing you find weird or different about linking to a whole library like Bootstrap? Have you ever done anything like this? So I'll just let you know here too. Notice these links, and we can look at our own HTML. Maybe that'd be a better way to do it. CDN, when you see that, is a content delivery network. So that means there's web servers out there that instead of having to have all this stuff locally, which you might end up getting when you get a template starting next week, but in this case, it allows you to just link to it out there. So this is a very common thing you'll see in web development. Okay. All right. So now in your reply, right? So say something, right? If there's nothing that you felt here, say something about the work that we've done here, anything you ran into, right? Here's how I'm going to grade. Did you get all those commits? Did they actually follow the code that you needed to do? Did you confirms link successful? I'm just saying, because you actually don't have to post anything here. I'll verify that and then update it and then do a reply, right? Let me read that again. So actually, this is just talking about what you needed to put in your post. So you actually don't need, because remember, you're doing all this work in your private repo, and we're not posting anything regarding the output. That's something that I will grade as part of these points, and this is your post and then your reply. Okay, I look forward to seeing what your experience of setting this up. Please reach out for help. Remember, the earlier you get this done, if you run into any challenges, the sooner I can or Brianna can help you. Oh, actually, Brianna can't. She's actually taken the class. I got to remember that. This is 82, but I bet she would actually answer questions. But please come see me. Remember, my office hours are in simple syllabus.